Okay, thanks very much for that, Ross. I hope you won't hold my media use to get votes against me here. It was something that Ross set up, and so I'm not taking any credit for that. However, for me, the premise was merger of councils, one Dunbartonshire, one Renfrewshire, one Ayrshire. From my point of view, I agree operationally that this is something that we want to do, and given the demand for our services across all areas, elderly, waste management, fuel energy costs, there's a whole range of things, reasons for it. We need to get more for less. That's the bottom line. Let's be honest about that. It's the bottom line, getting more for less. And also about trying to maintain high standards, and improve standards while we're doing that. So logically, mergers would seem to be the way forward to get us economies of scale and the efficiencies that we need to meet the challenges. However, I think history tells us that the cost of reorganisation really isn't affordable in this current climate. I think it would take a decade to get payback if we went back to the bigger organisations. But touching on what Angela said, I do genuinely believe that local identity is important to the people that we represent. I think people of Clackmannanshire will die to keep their identity. I think it's important to them. I think in Dunbartonshire we would want to retain that. We don't want to be part of a big faceless corporation. That's important. So doing that, I still believe you can have the one council, if you like, by sharing services and merging services. I think that's the important thing, but yet maintain that local identity, maintain local accountability, and make that link with people with the services that they use. And I think one example I think is quite stark for me is education. West Dunbartonshire Council, my own council, we have 4 secondary schools, 34 primary schools. North Lanarkshire Council, the biggest council in Scotland, has 24 secondary schools and 121 primary schools. And I think everybody else is somewhere in between all of that. Do we all need a centralised structure? Do we need a directorate to look after our schools? Surely we should be educating to the same standard across Scotland. So from my point of view, do we need that expensive overhead across 32 councils? Probably not. So for me, the shared services agenda that the Clyde Valley have embarked on is important, but I think it touches on some services and doesn't go far enough. I don't think it should be exclusively perhaps like Clackmannan and Stirling. I think it has to be best fit. It could be a best fit, Dumbarton and East Dumbarton coming together to be one education authority. It could be that within Inverclyde we might do something completely different. I think the fit needs to be there. And as a politician, I'm not particularly interested in the operational side. I think our opinion is that we have got to deliver services. Actual outcomes, what makes a difference for people is important. And from Angela's point of view, she has a problem. She's the paid executive of the council. It's up to our executives to come up with the solutions that make that happen. And I do believe that we have the talent in the pool of executives that we have across Scotland to make this happen. But getting outcomes that make a difference is key to all of this. And the fit should be right. But I think we should go much further than just sharing our bin collections. I think we've got to look at merging service areas across the board to see what is the best fit with us as a council. And my proposition would be that we do as much shared services, merging services, but we do retain that local identity. I don't think anyone identified the Strathclyde region on the street. I don't think that ever happened. Nobody saw I belong to Strathclyde. I don't think so, somehow or other. And I think we've got to do that because people have to have confidence in what we do. And I believe that that can be achieved by having one council behind the scenes and yet retain that local identity.
So a slight variation on an earlier theme, and you can see from that, one of the reasons we chose those two topics together was because we want to get the message out that different solutions for different parts of the country is an important aspect, and we're hoping that message is going to come out of the Christie Commission report, that you end that silly template mentality of having the same solution imposed all over Scotland. So, on Iain's proposition, any questions? John?
Thank you. Iain, in principle you'll get my vote, so you can relax.
Nothing to do with the hair of it.
No. I suppose the question really is, we do a lot of work in public and private sector, and most mergers actually don't deliver. Private sector mergers, I think it's less than 50% deliver what they say is going to happen. And you quite often see that happening in these projects. Why is that? They're ill-conceived, they don't have the right structural case there, but more often than not it's the cultural fit. And I hear what you say about getting the culture right at the outset. Really how you tackle that bit in the first instance, because it's not just the politicians, it's the employees, and it's, use a word I was told off for using yesterday, stakeholders. Your local people want local services, but actually making them realise it doesn't need to be delivered, absolutely in their own area. How do we get across that point?
Well, you're absolutely right. I didn't say it was going to be easy, and I think from a political perspective it's very difficult. Coming from a West of Scotland council, I can tell you it's going to be exceptionally difficult. I chaired the Clyde Valley Shared Services group for a couple of years, and the politicians find this difficult, and it is going to take, Angela mentioned a lot of good points, it's about trust, it's about building up that trust, and I think it's the same through our staff, but I do think we need to focus on the outcomes, and I think people really care. If the person that's looking after them comes through the door at 9 o'clock every morning, does their breakfast, does what they need to do in their homes, does it really matter? And I think we have to get over that. But interestingly though, people still value that local identity, so whilst they don't care as long as the person's coming through the door, it would be a hell of a hoo-ha if you took away that local identity. So somehow or other we need to manage that, and we need to deliver the outcomes and let people see that these outcomes are going to be there, but still within a framework that certainly feels local.
Any other questions to Iain? Gentlemen here.
With respect to education, if you feel it is a Scottish-wide thing, why not leave it to Scottish Government to deal with education matters?
Yeah, well, in terms of standards, yes, without a doubt it's a Scottish-wide thing, but if you compare West Dunbartonshire Council, we are now I think we've moved from first to second worst employment black spot in the UK, and compare that with East Dunbartonshire, we are different. What's on the ground is very different, so you still need an element of locality, to actually model the way we do our services. I think Angela touched on that in terms of policy. What is absolutely right for Stirling might not quite be absolutely right for Clackmannan. It's the same for us too. There's ways of managing, the actual organisation. I don't believe, I come from a private sector background, and I find it difficult to imagine why it's different in one authority to another to manage schools. I find that really difficult. What the teachers do at local level has to be perhaps different to meet, the people that the young children have got in their schools. But I think in terms of management and structure, I don't see why there should be a difference.
Any of our other presenters want to ask Iain a question?
I'll go and have a go.
I would just agree to some degree though that you can standardise things across the board. I think that we would all aspire to a minimum standard of education being applied across the board. But for me, we all live in different communities. We all have different issues within our communities. I have, in some areas, a very deprived set of circumstances, and because of that, our policies reflect it. That's not the same in Stirling. So I think that within reason, you can have a framework within which local authorities can work, but you couldn't have it unified and address the outcomes and adhere to your single outcome agreement the way that we all would like to, if it was a one-size-fits-all.
Can I just make an observation? Sorry, I'm not totally convinced in the sense that it suggests to me that what's more important in terms of discussion is disadvantage compared with the children's education, and I think that children's education is paramount, and there's no reason why a national system can't be broken down in a way. There's no reason why a national system can't be administered in a broken down way to deliver effective education to the children.
Just on that, anybody here from a policing background? There's debate about single Scottish police service and how that relates. One of the themes of our work on public service reform is to look at that relationship between central government and local government and the local state. And we haven't really had that debate in Scotland since the Parliament was plonked in on the top of existing structures, and there wasn't really a discussion about that relationship between central and local. And the policing debate is beginning to look at those issues. So whether you have a single force with operational responsibility devolved down to divisional level or not, and getting that relationship right. But it's a difficult discussion because we haven't had that chat about where does central fit, where does local fit, and how do they relate to each other. Iain, do you want to pick up?
Yeah, I'll comment on the police thing. You know, in West Dunbartonshire, we've got very good divisional link with the police, and it works very well. We have we put in extra funding for community police. So at a divisional level, that's where it needs to actually work. Where Stephen House sits doesn't really matter. You know, that's my view. If you get
Stephen House being the chief constable,
yeah,
stuff like
you know, if you get the divisional side right and it's working on the ground, does it matter where it's headquartered? Personally, I don't think it matters because the divisional side of it to me is the important aspect of it.
John, did you want to pick up on this or?
Well, it's more.
Can you grab the, sorry, and can I just grab the mic to John for a moment because I want to pick up on this bit. I'll come back to you.
Actually, the point I want to pick up on was outcomes, because I think you've all mentioned outcomes in some shape or form, and really the issue is how do you align your budgets to really deliver these outcomes, because that seems to be one of the challenges at the present time. The way the funding streams work, you can't actually deliver the real outcomes that the public want.
I mean, from a West Dunbartonshire perspective, the very high levels of deprivation that we have, we can't afford to be spending money at the centre. We need to be spending more money at the front end. So, no, I think that's a really important thing to get across. I think it costs us more in a lot of ways, every way, to educate our children because of the severe deprivation. And I do have a problem with the way we're funded, to be honest, in terms of deprivation. But you know, in the context that we have just now, we, of any council, have to reduce our overheads to allow us to divert it to the front line. You know, we need to do that. That's a given. You know, so whilst we could argue about how we're funded for education, you know, even just currently at an operational level, we need to reduce our overhead to allow us to channel it to the front end.
Okay, two more questions up the back. Then I think Stephen wants to make a point as well.
Mine isn't a question, Ross. If you'll forgive a reference to another policy organisation, SPIF, the Scottish Policy Innovation Forum,
it's a great name.
did a meeting, well, it's better than Spliff, ran a very interesting seminar recently relative to the Christie Commission, and the presentations given by 3 senior police figures are on the SPIF website and make interesting reading.